servant's heart. Welcome to the podcast. Inspiration, motivation takes. Listen to the podcast. We're all about to talk about life. Our guests will share their life story. We want you to success in life and business. We're ready and we will start shortly. We're gonna talk about life. We're going to speak on business. You're gonna shine bright. We are going to witness business with a servant's heart. With hosts Steve, Ramon, and Ray. Inspiration, education talks. Listen to the podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. I'm your host, Steve Ramona. I am thrilled to have you join us today. This podcast is dedicated to exploring the idea of doing business and living life with a purpose, serving others, and yes, achieving success. We believe that when we approach our work and our lives with a servant's heart, we can truly make a difference. We created this show for you because we want everyone to be motivated, inspired, and educated to make an impact in your world. Whether you're an entrepreneur, community leader, or simply someone looking to bring more purpose into your daily life, this is a podcast that's here to support you. While you're listening to my incredible guests today, I want you to think about who you're going to serve today and what impact you're going to create. And the key is today. Today's episode is brought to you by our amazing sponsor, Pantheon Alliance. Picture yourself joining an elite community of highly successful, highly income earning entrepreneurs and business owners in so many different industries to grow your business by connecting and growing your network. Imagine being in a network of a billionaire and what your business will do. Reach out to me and I'll tell you more about Pantheon Alliance and get you more information. With that being said, a lot of coaches out there, but this coach, for me, does it different because he does it from a servant's heart. Not that others don't. But what I love when you coach, you got to be tough sometimes, but you also have to have a servant's heart. Dr. Yishai, welcome to the show.
It's such a pleasure to be here. I am so excited for our conversation.
An audience, and be very transparent. Yishai is how you say it. I've been practicing it for the last 2 minutes to say it right. Did I get it right?
You got it.
I got it right. Beautiful. Dr. Yishai, psychological leverage. What a powerful 2 words. What does that mean?
Yeah. So psychology, the way I understand it, the way I think about it, and just a little bit of background. So I'm a doctor of psychology. I have background in training in psychology. And so I've been steeped in this for, at this point, close to 2 decades, maybe more. And the way I understand psychology is about our thoughts, our emotions, our reactions, and why it is that we're doing what we're doing. And what I found this to be such a big part of what both drives people, motivates them, makes them perform at their best, and also could potentially get in their way, is how we navigate both what we want and our challenges and obstacles. And for some people, they seem to have a natural ability for things not to be so difficult when they're trying to overcome challenges or problems. And they seem to really these are the kinds of people you're like, why is life so easy for them and it's so hard for me? And a lot of times what I found is like, I don't know, 80+%, that's not like an actual statistic, but so much of the time, so often, what's happening is that our brain is weighing and evaluating and producing thoughts and having emotions, and all of that stuff and how we handle it is a huge part of whether or not or how difficult it is us trying to get to our goals or kind of stepping up to our goals. And for some people, it seems to work really easily or go really smoothly or go really well. And for other people, it seems like no matter what, they just endlessly get caught up. And there's so much spinning wheels, just putting tons of time and effort and energy, or wanting to and really struggling to. And I found that the real big difference between them is how much, the term lever or leverage, all the way back from, I forget if it's like Archimedes or Socrates, but the idea of, if you give me a lever that's long enough, I can lift the world. Just like you can get such output when you know how to handle it and what to do with it. And so I spent, more than 2 decades, way more than 2 decades, both personally and then professionally, really trying to figure it out. And so psychological leverage, the way I understand it, is recognizing that our psychology can make our challenges either way easier to overcome or way harder to overcome. And leverage is all about being able to get more out of the energy or effort we put in. So for me, it's really that mission of how do you make it simpler, smoother, faster, easier so you can go further with less effort, or it certainly feels more effortless. There's no success without actually putting in work. It would be lovely if any of us could, flick a switch and, money would just drop from the sky. That's not reality. So recognizing that there will be effort, and yet there's a difference. For some people, they put in tons of effort and it seems effortless. And for other people, it seems like even a small amount of effort is just so hard to put in, and they seem to get so little out of it.
How's that relate to business owners, entrepreneurs, and executives?
That's a great question. So when it comes to entrepreneurs, that I'm going to separate them out. So someone who's an executive, they spend so much of their time making decisions. They spend a lot less of the time doing the on the ground or in the front lines, as it were, work. And so much of what matters is what are they looking at? How are they evaluating a situation? What are they paying attention to? And what are they using to make their decisions? And so for executives who are really, really top, and I actually recently had a conversation, a really awesome conversation with a Fortune 50 exec. One of the things that shows up really frequently among the top executives is they're learning what to pay attention to and how to make decisions off of that. And then after that is also how do they communicate it and how do they get the people around them to really be on board and invested in that process. And so there's a kind of decision-making process that really matters. And then there's how do you approach and communicate with, and in a way, it's almost like gathering a following, people who want to do, right? Instead of trying to drag or bring them along into it. And again, there's a lot of psychology involved in all of that. And that's just for executives. For a business owner, some business owners will be in leadership positions themselves. Some are a little bit further back. And either way, there's so much around if they want to expand their business, what are the moves that they're making? What's the game they're playing? How are they approaching playing that game? And how are they thinking about that for themselves and the people, and just how they're approaching all of those pieces. And some business owners are in the business and doing more of the work. And again, it's what are they paying attention to? What are their strengths? What are the areas or the things that when they do them actually lights them up? What are some of the things that for them, when they do it, actually costs a lot of time, energy, or effort? And it's sometimes really easy to tell if someone who's an owner or they're in a leadership position, and you can see when they're doing something and it's taking so much energy out of them, they're so stressed out, they're way more likely to do things like snap or I hope they're not yelling at the people around them, but they might not be, at the very least, they feel so drained. They're not attentive to, they're not recognizing or attuned to when they're getting feedback, or they may not notice even subtle cues, and certainly things end up escalating and creates more fires, big fires that they end up having to put out when they're not paying attention to the things that are really important to pay attention to. And oftentimes they end up falling into a more reactive approach as opposed to a proactive approach. So there's like some of those risks and challenges that can sometimes happen. And for entrepreneurs, it's a whole other ballgame also, because for entrepreneurs, oftentimes their business is their baby. Sometimes for business owners, that's also the case, especially for family businesses. For entrepreneurs, a lot of times they're getting paid out of their business, or they're struggling to pay themselves out of their business. And so there's a lot sometimes of their own sense of identity or sense of self-worth, or their emotions often get really tied into the ups and downs that they're experiencing. And because of that, there's a lot of potential to use that as really useful data to make increasingly better decisions. There's also a risk of that actually really throwing them off. And so I've kind of seen that in these different contexts.
Yeah, I like that because it's all the same, but it's worked differently in each executive, business owner, and entrepreneur. It's still mindset, but you got to be careful with that. Interesting question you gave me that we're going to talk about is, you can work with $1 billion company even though you've not made $1 billion? I think it's a fantastic question. How can you do that?
It's a really great question. So the thing about working in $1 billion company or building $1 billion company, there's going to be a set of constraints and challenges and problems that you need to overcome in order to grow or scale that much. And then along with that comes a unique set of its own challenges or problems. So, there's a very big difference between having a company where it's you and a VA, or a company where you have 25 employees, a company where you start to have more than 25, you get to 50 or 100. And once you start to get into the 10 plus figures, what's happening is you're seeing multiple layers of leadership. You're seeing executive and sometimes multiple layers of executive leadership, C-level and all these other levels. And then there are pieces that come into play that are so different than when a company is smaller. And it's not that if someone has been through that and they've successfully been through it or they've exited, then they might have some perspective on it. What's really interesting is that from my vantage point, the bigger a company gets, the more people are involved. The more people are involved, the more psychology there's involved. And the more that psychology is going to interact between all the people and also the customers, clients, or users, depending on the type of organization, company, and what they're offering, what they're selling, services are. So when it comes to someone who's making 10 figures or their company is at, sorry, not 10 figures, 10 figures. What often is the case is that they are facing a situation where small decisions they make have these huge rippling compounding impacts. And so even the most seemingly mundane decision and then how it's followed through or how it's handled has a bigger and bigger and bigger impact. It's kind of like major leagues, if you want to think about it that way.
Yeah.
And at every level that a business moves up is another kind of league that it's in, which also by its own nature, as you scale up, increases the complexity of it. And so, sure, there's all the business side stuff. There's, the P&Ls and the finance, and then and there's, can you reduce the cost and how much it costs to create or produce or fulfill. And then there's, how do you scale up as far as sales and marketing and advertising? Then you get into branding and stuff. There's all of this stuff. And then that's all on a business side. But then you have on the personal side, because the exec or executive team, they have their own particular challenges that they're facing. And it's a lot more difficult to maintain the level of performance or the level of expectation. And we see this a lot when companies get really big. You tend to have a lot more bureaucracy. There's a lot more stuff that's falling in between the cracks. How many times do people complain about companies as they get way bigger that they lose that kind of sense of connection? And it happens on the macro level. When that's happening to the customers and the users, the clients, chances are it's actually a reflection of what's happening internally in the organization, all the way up to the leadership. And so from my vantage point, psychology becomes that much more important and that much more critical. And, another analogy that I'll use is someone can be an Olympic gold medalist and they might share how they got to where they got to. And that might give them really valuable perspective. And they might be really great mentors. Does that mean that they know everything that they need to know in order to coach someone to become an Olympic gold medalist? They certainly have a very important, unique perspective and what to contribute, and a coach who's coached those kinds of athletes is going to have a whole other set of experiences and a whole other perspective to add. And so, in a way, I think for far too long, we've kind of relegated psychology to either the pop psychology or the backseat or into the even sometimes just the therapy space. Or sometimes we take like these assessments that psychologists come up with and then we try to apply them in the workplace, or they're being used in the workplace. And sometimes they're even being misapplied, which is another thing. And I think it's high time that we understand that performance is so much of performance is psychology, and so much of what is really critical for being in that top percentile um, is how we see, understand, process, think about, make decisions, communicate. So much of it is really tied up into all of those things.
So well said. And the good and bad thing, there's good things about people and there's bad things about people. We need people in our business. So that's where you come in, or a good coach like you with the mindset. Like that's what a lot of it is with people, is their mindset. And how do you work with it? What is a big mistake you've seen with your clients that they make with mindset?
There are a couple of them I see. The biggest one is really about their focus and attention. So a lot of my clients are really into, mindfulness, meditation. They're into performance stuff like their sleep. They tend to be really thoughtful, comma, and at the same time. So there are two things that happen that really affect their performance in this realm. One of them is that they'll either themselves or somebody around them that they need to work with, it has a big reaction, an emotion or a thought. And then the way that comes out, it changes it's almost like the quality of the attention and the direction of the attention. The best analogy I have for it is imagine a flashlight. And so if you're holding a flashlight in your hand, you can hold it above your head, down. You could hold it, at your belt, up. You could hold it, kind of straight, shoulder height. And then it also could be a flashlight that just, sprays light broadly or is almost like a laser. And so all those things make a really big difference. And what I find is a lot of times when someone, either they themselves, an executive or a business owner or entrepreneur, when they're having an emotion, the whole quality of their attention, their focus, their performance, their ability to make decisions can get kind of put on tilt or on off kilter. They can end up off center. And sometimes they recognize it and other times they don't. And it can change what they're looking at, what they're using to evaluate or consider the decisions they're making, or how they communicate about it. And so I find that really, as much as I think actually the focus and the attention is much more a symptom. And I think at its core, it's much more about the emotions that they're experiencing and how do they understand, interpret, and address it.
There's so much to unpack there. I'm not going to try, but it's so cool. And what I love about you is emotions, but how do you make it sound so logical and simple with emotions?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So the first thing is most people think that emotions are really illogical. And so they separate two emotions into two buckets. There's the kind of emotions I want to have. I want to feel happy. I want to feel joy. I want to feel love and connection. I want to feel acceptance and belonging. All these stuff that I really want to feel. I want to feel awe, excitement, all this stuff that I really want to feel. And those are often the feel goods, right? And then there are all these emotions that people don't like, that are really uncomfortable, that they find really difficult. Starting with, not limited to, shame, anger, overwhelm, frustration, even feeling really sad or down, sense of grief or loss. These are all experiences that can be really uncomfortable, sometimes profoundly so. Guilt and embarrassment are other examples. Even hatred. And like, I cannot tell you how many times I walk around and I see someone on their lawn, they have a sign that says hate has no place here. And I'm like, hate is so important. And I say that because the way I understand emotions is they're not just separated into, the light and the dark, the ones we want and the ones we don't. Each emotion actually has a job. If I could surgically remove any given emotion from a person, they would have a lot of difficulty functioning in the world. There'd be a lot of areas or ways in which that things that we all take for granted would actually kind of fall apart inside of us. We would be unable to see or notice or make changes or adapt or even make improvements. And so what I've done actually is I've taken for more than 30 different emotions. And it's one of my favorite things to do. I love asking people, name an emotion, any emotion. I'll give you a very simple math equation that's logical, completely logical, that will tell you when it shows up, why it shows up, even how it shows up, what it's trying to do for you. And ultimately, when you understand that any given emotion actually has a job, they all have a purpose, and they're trying to help us see something, then it becomes much easier to translate or unpack it. And then you're responding to it differently. So as a quick example, or to give a little bit of a deeper dive. So emotions typically have one of three jobs, or three kind of broad things that they're doing. One is they might be telling me a need or value or a desire that I have that's really important to me. So they might be trying to help me accomplish something, or they might be protecting me. In other words, it's telling me I need to change my behavior to do that. So, really simple example of that. Some people wouldn't even call this an emotion, but if I'm feeling hungry, as an analogy, my brain is interpreting messages from my body and saying it's important for me to get nutrition. And so it's going to prompt me to change my behavior, because if I just sit and don't ever eat, I'm not gonna be alive. I certainly won't function my best, right? And so that's just like a really simple example of that. And that's just level one, or layer one, is emotions tell us it's important to make a change in our behavior. Level two is sometimes emotions are actually highlighting that I have some expectation or belief or assumption, and it's actually out of sync with reality. And so the emotion's actually pointing out to me that I have some idea, or I don't have some idea, and it's incorrect, or it's not actually as accurate as I assume it is. The best example of that, the easiest example, is if you've ever been surprised. Literally, surprise is the emotion. Here's a simple equation. Surprise equals, it shows up when expectation, where we have an expectation, but it's not fulfilled, it ends up being broken. Right. So if I expect something to happen and it doesn't happen, or if I don't expect something to happen and bam, it happens, I experience surprise. Literally, surprise is the emotion and what happens in our brain is our brain starts to really pay attention to, and it primes us to change our thinking from, I expected that, but this happened. Why did this happen? And what am I supposed to expect in the future? So that's just an example. And there are many emotions that in many different situations are actually trying to get us to shift or change our thinking, our understanding, or our mental model for the world, how we perceive, or what our beliefs or expectations are. And that's level or layer two. And then there's a third layer. So there's behavior, there's your brain, and then there's your body. Sometimes your emotions actually telling you something about your body, which might be that my body has a need. So if I'm feeling exhausted, my brain might be telling me, oh, my body is low in energy. Maybe it's depleted. I need a break. Or maybe I didn't get enough sleep, or maybe I'm not consistently getting enough sleep. And so sometimes what it's doing is trying to get me to make that change. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. And I love it. We're coming to the end here, but any last words?
Any last words? If there's an emotion that that comes up that you hear from the audience that you've seen that people really get stuck on or they don't understand, I would absolutely love to give you, my kind of equation, when it shows up, why it shows up, how it shows up, and give you this kind of really quick, logical, like I think, again, they're simple and logical when you really understand them. So I would love to do that with one that comes to mind for you.
Emotion. Angry.
Angry. Oh, I love anger. Anger is one of my favorite emotions. And I'll tell you. So anger shows up. My equation for anger is when you have a line, and we all have them, and that line is crossed. So I'll tell you something. Anger doesn't care who did it. Even though a lot of times for most people, when they experience anger, their brain focuses its attention on that person did this thing. Really what our brain is saying, I have a line, whether it's my self-respect, or my sense of respect, whether it's something that I wanted or had anticipated that I was going to do or was going to happen, it's not happening. There's some kind of a line that I have, and somebody or something crossed that line. Now, all anger cares about is I have this line. And in order for me to feel comfortable, safe, okay, I need my line to be secure, to be safe, for people and situations and companies not to cross that line, or certainly not to do it all the time. And so all anger cares about when this line is crossed is to push whoever or whatever has crossed that line back over the line, essentially to reestablish my sense of whatever that line is, whatever that context is. Now, when you look at it that way, anger is super logical. Now, to be clear, that might be telling me that anger oftentimes prompts us to say or do something about it. And sometimes we mix up when someone is yelling with the experience of anger, which is the emotion of anger is there to tell me I have a line that's been crossed. All anger cares about, it doesn't care about my behavior. It doesn't even care about the other person. What it really cares about is I have this line and I need to do something that's going to help reestablish or secure my line. And so when I work with clients and they talk about anger and we're working on it, what often comes up around that is it's okay for you to have that line crossed. What if all that it's okay for you to experience that anger? What if you didn't have the anger, then the line would be crossed. You'd never be able to notice it. Like for me, the scarier place to live is not a world with anger. It's a world without anger, because then people would be grabbing my wallet and I'd have no sense of my line being crossed. And I and our country, our legal system, our society would have no interest or no care to make any change in that. I'd have nothing, right? And so when you look at it that way, all you need is to be able to translate that into, okay, what's the most effective action that's going to reestablish my line? Well, once I know that, bam, I'm going to be motivated to do that. And if I have done that well, I will take the most effective action in order to get that. Now, sometimes what anger might be saying is, I have a line, but I might be a little bit too trigger happy with my line. Maybe what I think is my line is actually not the best place to put that line or the right line to have. And so sometimes when anger shows up, it's saying, hey, you think you have a line here, or you're reacting like you have a line here. This might be something worth looking over at again and maybe shifting your perspective on. And I don't think that it's for me to say to that person, well, it is or isn't, or it's healthy or not. I think it's for all of us to sometimes say, well, maybe it's telling me I need to change my behavior. Maybe sometimes it's telling me that, I make an assumption or I think something is not okay. And would I still be okay if that happened? Would I be okay if somebody, took my wallet? No, I wouldn't be happy with it, certainly if it was happening every day. Does it warrant a 10 out of 10 reaction? Maybe not. Maybe it would warrant a different kind of reaction. If I was having that reaction, or if somebody, said something insulting or left a YouTube comment and said something about me or whatever, right? If I'm having a really big reaction and I'm experiencing anger, it might really be telling me, hey, you're taking that or responding to that as if it's crossing a line. And maybe I need to look at my lines. Maybe I need to look at how I'm interpreting that. And so there's so many other angles to it. And that's where it can be really helpful to have some like extra guidance or someone who can kind of help you unpack that. Yeah.
Let's I love this. Let's get a little personal. We got a couple minutes left. So I want to ask you this question I'm asking everybody now. I love. So you're going to a restaurant, there's a table of 4. You sit in one of the chairs, the other 3 chairs are occupied, your choice, dead or alive, those 3 people, and why you would pick those 3 people, and what food would you order?
Oh, wow. I have not really thought about this. So
what comes to your head?
What comes to my mind? So the first thing, I'll start with the easy part. So I happen to be Orthodox Jewish, and so I only eat kosher. So in my head, I'm thinking like, where would I really like to sit down? It would probably be like a pizza place, like a kosher pizza place. And who would I sit with? Four seats. I imagine I'm sitting in one of them. So, I think I would really love to sit down with Bill Gates. The guy's got heart and a brain and a whole lot of not just influence, but desire to make really positive change in the world. I think I'd love to sit down with, it's going to sound kind of cliche, Oprah. She understands and gets right into people's hearts. And sees and talks about and delves so much into, really matters for so many of us in life. And I would probably pick it's really hard to pick the last one. Really hard to pick the last one.
That's a good thing.
I think I'd probably want to sit with Einstein too. I think all four of us would sit down and have a really interesting conversation. And I think if we put our brains to it, there's so much we could do to help and change and make the world a better place.
Yeah, I definitely be with those three. Absolutely. Well, how can people reach out to you and support you?
It's a great question. So LinkedIn is probably the best place to reach out and see and support me. I have a podcast. If you want to check out the podcast, it's called Think Mastery with Dr. Yishai. And so over there, you'll be able to see, also how to reach out to me. Those are probably the two best places. And then, of course, my website, dryishai.com.
Beautiful. Easy, simple. Reach out to them. Emotions are huge. Going to make a difference in your business. 5%, 50%, we don't know, but it's going to make a difference on the upside, not the downside. So reach out to them. And don't forget to comment on YouTube or the podcast when you see this. I'll get the comments to Dr. Yishai. Make sure he gets them. And if you can't get a hold of, you don't have a way to get home, it'll be in the show notes. And as always, Dr. Yishai and I thank you so much for watching and listening to this podcast. And we'll see you on the next episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. See y'all.